What are you doing? Oh, yeah. Saturday. Pretending.
Yeah.
Well, Lane is a teacher, and once his job is
It's 5:30. We'll call the utilities meeting to order. Please stand and pledge allegiance to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Will do. Alderman Redpath.
Here.
Alderman Gregory.
Here.
Alderwoman Turner. Alderman Fulgenzi.
Here.
Alderman Proctor. Alderwoman DeCenso.
Present.
Alderman McMiniman.
Here.
Alderwoman Conley.
present.
Alderman Donlin.
Here.
Alderman Hanauer.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, a quorum is present.
Thank you. I'll accept a motion for approval of the June 5th, 2019 Public Utilities Committee minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, the ayes have it. We have presentations. We're going to start off with the presentation by the General Manager. Doug, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to talk about an update to IRP. But before I get started, I do want to talk about an update to 33. GE was on site last week, started pulling the shell off the turbine. Just the initial visual inspection is, better than we had hoped. So it looks better than we expected. But more testing is still needed really to confirm that. Because there's certain things you can't see with the naked eye. So put that in perspective, though, that GE should have something back to us within a couple weeks as far as what the assessment might be. I'm sure there'll be some back and forth questions, but hopefully, I'm hoping that maybe by December 30th, I can bring back something that's a little more definitive in nature on what's going on with 33. So. So our agenda tonight is really to talk about the mission of the utility, why we did an RRP, just a recap of T's recommendations, an overview of public comments received, talk about reliability, the financial and environmental considerations for our generation resources, and then some options and next steps, and then have Scott Madden kind of brief us on the decommissioning plan if we once the dates would be chosen. So talking about a core mission, for the utility and really to be a public power municipally owned utility, there's things that we strive for, some guiding principles, and the value that we provide through affordable and reliable electric and water services. For years, we've been able to shield our customers from high market prices and provide competitive rates. But with businesses right now, they don't have affordable rates in our city anymore, and we need to get back to that basic element. And if we can lower our operating costs, through power supply costs, then in the future we can get more competitive rates. We want to provide high-quality service and be responsive to our customer needs. For our community, our facilities, our employees, our resources really have been intertwined in the community for decades. And the local control, the local decisions that are made have made the utility successful for many, many, many years. So in order for City Water, Light, and Power to provide, reliable and competitive power to the city of Springfield, we really needed to do an IRP because we needed to really assess our current generation resources against what future options are out there. And there's fundamental things that we needed to consider in this, and that one is that our load has been decreasing for many years. Our units aren't competitive in the market. In fact, this fiscal through October, they're operating 30% less than what we expected, just because power prices are so low. So there's opportunity out there for lower cost options, really because natural gas prices have suppressed the energy markets. And we owe it to our customers to try to provide the least cost options that we can. There's also significant capital expenditures for environmental compliance and maintenance. So just real quickly, I'm going to cover what T's recommendations were that came out last spring. Retire Dahlman units 31, 32, 33, retain Unit 4 in the combustion turbines, and do an IRP in 3 to 5 years. Some other recommendations were do a request for proposal and RFP for renewables, which would also include purchase power agreements, really for energy and capacity, and also expand energy efficiency efforts. So now I'm going to go over public comments that were obtained on the IRP results. Remember, we did public comments at the beginning for what went into the IRP, and then we took public comments on what was done after the results were released. And those public comments can be found on our website if you want to read them in more detail, but I'm going to try to summarize them really into brief categories to make the process a little smoother. So one of the first things we noticed was that you can categorize it into resource preferences. Really, some were wanting to follow the T plan and retire 31, 32, and 33 while increasing renewables, reducing the reliance on fossil fuels. Others wanted to keep 33 and Unit 4, while others wanted a mix of generations resources because it's just it's better because you can have more diversity. Others were more objective in nature or goal-orientated. They wanted to have a creation of clean energy jobs, while others wanted the retention of coal jobs. They wanted us to consider health impacts as well as environmental impacts, while others wanted just to see what the lowest cost per power options were. There's also some that said that there's a risk of coal plants of operating them, while there's some others were saying that there's a risk of having renewables. There's also another set of comments that were we took into a different category of really challenging T's work or their report and the results. And we felt that really T needed to follow up with a response to that with further clarification. They provided us with a letter, and I'll try to kind of highlight some of these. And we actually posted the letter. It's on our website as well. So that can be reviewed by everybody in more detail. But one of the items was considered different inputs. And T basically came back and said no viable inputs were missed because they were all thoroughly vetted at the beginning. They took public comments, took those into kind of consideration, and really came out with the best mix that they could. Others were consider all coal or all renewables. And what their response was is that utilizing a diverse fuel mix is prudent industry practice and lowers risk. And we've seen this really common throughout the industry that other utilities are doing. Another one was looking at the replacement gas turbine costs. So when T suggested that there's a possibility of using a replacement gas turbine, they provided the cost associated with that, and that was kind of being challenged. And they basically came back and said what they used was fair and prudent for the IRP. Others considered saying that you should look at new technologies. One of them was batteries, and that technology is evolving. And T basically came back and said it really shouldn't be included in this IRP, but it possibly could be in the next IRP as long as there's some issues that, like with MISO and how they're considered, I guess you might say, in the mix in the market, then they could be considered in the next IRP. Another one was actually the jet technology, which I'll get to next on the next slide. Another one was consider new fuel prices, so specifically like coal. And basically T's response was that they looked at a high coal price, a flat coal price. They compared it to what the market was doing in real time, and thought that what their results were prudent. But kind of outside of that, outside of the RFP process, so we actually looked at what fuel or what coal costs would be needed to keep 31, 32, and 33 economic. We couldn't find a coal price that is low enough to keep those units economic and actually be able to leave a mine that they could operate and without losing money. So there are drastic drops in coal prices that would be needed to keep those units. As far as the jet technology goes, it's really their version of an ammonia scrubber. What T found when looking at some of the documents is that basically the success is dependent upon revenues from fertilizer sales. In other words, their operating costs for their scrubbers are higher than ours. So how they make up for that is through fertilizer sales. So what that does is it shifts the risk to the city as far as to understand, and make sure that they can cover that. And then there's also very limited then recovery for capital costs as far as the installation goes. So your investment of capital into building the system would be hard to recover because of that. It doesn't avoid the need for dry ash conversion of the older units. So that really impacts 31, 32, and 33, but not 4. And then one of the other items that there is no operating project in the United States right now, so that does have some concern for some of you, which is why it's up here. And as far as the utility is concerned, one of the biggest things that's really outside of T-scope is that in our discussions that we've had through the summer and up through October, essentially, with JET, is that they can't provide us with a guarantee that they can meet our emissions yet. We've highlighted that before, and specifically mercury. Our scrubbers basically remove a majority of mercury, and their system, they can't really guarantee that yet. So until they overcome that hurdle, those other items as far as the economics of it, that kind of thing, there's really no reason to study it at all. And there's no reason to put that time into it. But once they can prove to us that they can meet those requirements, then I would definitely want to consider it for Unit 4 going forward, even though there is some other risk issues with using this technology that's been debated before with the City Council. So now on to the reliability, financial, and environmental consideration of our generation resources. So here's just a snapshot of our units. You can see that 31, 32 are about 50 years old. Unit 33 is about 40 years old, and 4 is 10 years old. Here is an important slide because I think some of the comments from that we're getting from the public and even from our own employees is what happens with reliability if we're shutting down 31, 32, and 33 into the future with how can we cover our load. So on the left-hand side is our load that we have, and the average load throughout the year is 195 megawatts. And Unit 4 can cover that as it sits right now. If you take the load up to closer to our peak, which is, let's just say 350 megawatts, we only exceed that level 0.5% out of the year. So that's about 40 hours out of the year that we exceed that for our very high peak. And then with Unit 4 and our combustion turbines, it's pretty close to covering that at 348 megawatts if you add the two numbers up. We don't necessarily would operate that way as far as filling in with our combustion turbines like that. We would actually use market purchases with Unit 4 to cover our load because it's cheaper in the market to actually purchase off the grid versus operating the gas turbines. And then we use our gas turbines to cover the peaks, the very top peaks, or if the market calls for it. So if prices are more, we would use our gas turbines, okay? And one of the things that we're doing right now is we've started the process to upgrade our transmission lines so we can import more power and make ourselves more reliable. So here one of the issues is that's kind of driving things even for us more from a budget standpoint. Our wholesale revenues are decreasing year after year. And here it says, it's net income from energy sales and capacity sales, and the net is not necessarily a net true net, it's a net from variable. So it takes the energy sales and subtracts out fuel and the variable cost, but it's still not, that doesn't really necessarily represent the fixed cost, okay, of running a unit. But the point is that our energy sales are declining. And this fiscal to October, those same revenues are down $2 million right now than expected because the units are running 30% less. and we expect energy and capacity prices to continue to decline. So once the IRP was released, we wanted to basically do our own analysis and compare our operating costs plus the low market prices that we're seeing, and it really results in 31, 32, and 33 not being in the money. So the model that we use basically compared that we can do better in the market by approximately $10 to $12 million per year for 31, 32, and we can do better in the market by $13 to $16 million per year for 33. And what we used for this is our average O&M operating costs for those units. So that excludes the costs that would be needed for capital needs for environmental compliance and major repairs, which we'll talk about here in some future slides. So it's really lost savings to COP and our customers, even though some of those lost savings actually would funnel back through fuel adjustments, so it's not a true number that comes back to the utility necessarily. And some of those costs are actually shifted once a unit retires. So if there's equipment between 31, 32, and 33, 31, 32 is retired, those costs that are shared shift only to 33 at that point. So some of the numbers would change to as units are retired. One of the things here why I gave ranges to those numbers is because revenues are highly dependent upon energy and capacity prices, and we don't have a crystal ball of what those prices are going to look like. It's the best guesses that we can provide to that, and based upon what data we've got, and it kind of results in a range of where that might lie. But really, in order for those units to be viable, capacity prices would have to triple and energy prices would have to double. Here's a slide just to talk about demolition. It's kind of an odd slide that doesn't fit real well, but I wanted to just kind of get it over with. Lakeside Power Station was retired in 2009. So we have no current use for that facility, and it's the first priority for us to actually take down once we have enough cash, essentially, to do that and put it in our budget. The Dahlman Complex, we're not recommending that for near-term demolition at all because it's still used for offices, inventory. It has common equipment for Unit 4, and the land can't be used for economic development, so there is no need to try to demo that facility immediately. Demolition costs, again, to me, it's a sunk cost. No matter what you choose, eventually that unit's coming down. So we separated that from decommissioning costs when we talk about decommissioning costs later. And actually, to a demo Dahlman, we'd be looking at, again, taking the savings from any retired plants to apply towards further future demolition of those buildings. And it's estimated right now about $7.5 million to $10 million to demo the 3 units. Now this is a very busy slide because it talks about environmental compliance. It's really a good timeline to take with you. So I'm going to jump to some highlights out of that I want to talk about, really in helping us formulate decisions around 31, 32, and 33. The coal combustion residual rule, which is a CCR rule, and the effluent limit guideline rule, which is the ELG rule, was just revised in November by the Trump administration. We were looking to see some relief out of that, and we didn't get it. So what that's going to require us to do is for the units that are there, dry fly ash would have to be done by September of 2021. Dry bottom ash would have to be converted by October of 2023. And our ash ponds basically would stop receiving water by 2023. So those are expenses there that are going to be thrust upon us immediately if we were to keep these units open. And I'll get to that here in a minute. But another date in these rules is that if we're going to retire all 3 units, if we certify a closure date out in the future by 20 of May next year, then we can have an extension of our ash pond closure from 2023 to 2028. One of the other things we have to contend with is the Illinois Senate Bill 9 that covers the ash ponds. that rule could speed those dates up for compliance if the rules that are adopted out of that bill, restrict us more. 316A and 316B are federal rules for the intake and discharges that we have. I don't really see a big cost here, except for if we are required to build a cooling tower for the units, for these three. Unit 4 already has a cooling tower, so we're not concerned with that part. But if we have to build a cooling tower, that's more, millions of dollars that we have to spend. The Clean Energy Jobs Act here in Illinois, if that's adopted as is, it would close all coal power plants by 2030. And we're also concerned with, either the federal or state regulations for carbon regulation. So with that, of all these major investments that required millions and millions of dollars, and all of a sudden those rules came into effect and told us we had to shut down our units in 6 years or in 10 years, and we can't recoup the cost of those investments, then we've cost our customers a lot of money. One of the items that's a little more complicated is, again, the ELG rule for the scrubber blowdown. About 4 years ago, we did basically an estimate of cost for those 4 units, and it was about $45 million for a new treatment facility to meet the rules. The new rule that came out basically said that we have to be in compliance by June of 2023 for that rule. Now, the issue really for us to really and the reason I'm bringing this up is that Unit 4 by itself, the water's cleaner than the other units, and it's a lower volume of water, of course, if we take out 3 units. So we're closer to meeting the concentration limits of this rule, and we might be able to take get a chemical and put it in our existing treatment facility and actually meet the concentration limits with that and avoid building a smaller facility. So we could see cost savings with that by doing that. But if we commit to building, or not building, but retaining, 31, 32, and 33, then we have to consider spending quite a bit more money than for sure without relief. So options and next steps. Really retain Unit 4 in our combustion turbines is prudent because we need to cover our base load. Unit 4 is the most efficient and economical unit. It lowers risk because it keeps fuel diversity in play. Our combustion turbines, it covers the peaks we need, and it adds capacity at a low cost. If we retire Dahlman's 31 and 32, we avoid $40 million in cost in the next 5 years. And that's for dry ash conversion, boiler repairs, turbine overhauls, and major maintenance. And again, it excludes the costs for the scrubber blowdown to meet the ELG rule. So we also avoid the $10 to $12 million in loss versus the market. Decommissioning costs are about $700,000, and that's for basically disposing of lube oil out of the units, equipment, cleaning the facility, building heat is added, and that's the majority of that $700,000 cost. There's also 25 positions basically eliminated. But what that translates that into is there's 15 employees that would need to be transitioned because we haven't filled vacancies. We've had some retirements. We've also had some people that have transferred to other departments already. So if we retain 33, it does provide backup power to Unit 4 essentially, but at a higher cost, especially moving forward. It's even higher because we're going to incur $29 million in cost over the next 5 years, as well as continue with the $13 to $16 million in loss versus the market. It does retain jobs, and we would also have to start with our engineering work immediately with dry fly ash and the scrubber blowdown work. If we retire Unit 33, again, we avoid those costs. Decommissioning costs are about $2 million. The main portion of that is about $1.9 million in transmission upgrades. And there's really 50 employees that need to be transitioned if we then retired 31, 32, and then followed with 33. So, and originally we were looking at it, we identified probably about 81 jobs. We're down to really 65 affected employees now total because of the vacancies that we haven't filled and retirements and people transitioning to other jobs. So when we look at one of the biggest issues for us is really about our employees and trying to minimize the impacts to them. So we're working with HR, with legal, and the unions to really talk about job restructuring, training, and transitioning to other open jobs in the city. Options for severance, which actually was voted on with 2 of the contracts already, and then options for retirements and looking at incentives. So it's not an early out, not through IMRF. It's something that's totally separate from that. So I want to make sure that's very clear for everyone.
Got people's hopes up there for a second.
It's been asked, and I don't blame them. So if we're retiring, 31, 32, we don't really do anything different. But if we retire 33, we're going to expand our energy and capacity purchases because it is lowest cost as the market. Types of purchases that we would do is purchase power agreements for long-term, bilateral transactions, more mid-term, and then real-time day-ahead is really the short-term market for us. We would be developing a hedging strategy. We have one for selling power into the market. But if we're going to be buying power from the market, then that would flip, right? So we would have a hedging strategy for how we're going to cover the differences from our generators for our load, and then and also consider that the quantity of power that we need varies throughout the year. This one is just to kind of illustrate questions about like the natural gas market going out in the future. It's provided by Bloomberg. We actually got it through T. That shows out to 2031, gas prices are remaining relatively flat. So we can hedge power purchases out there at a relatively low cost because natural gas is suppressing everything right now. So I just want to show something that's more real time with the natural gas market. That's not to say that, again, that things can change in the future, but that's why you would lock into a 5-year contract or a 10-year contract to allow yourself enough time to react to changes in the future. And you wouldn't actually lock everything in. It's about how you're going to hedge your hedging strategy and to protect yourself from short and long-term pricing changes. One of the other things that we would do moving forward is expanding our customer energy efficiency programs. We would update our market assessments, reissue our customer surveys, and then develop a program, options, and funding. And our funding is, to really ramp these programs up would come from any savings that we would get from retiring the plants. So next steps and important dates. We want to lock in the dates and decisions for plant retirements by the end of January. So I think retiring Dahlman and 31, 32 is prudent. And if we retain Dahlman 33, we need to know that now because we've got engineering that we have to do in order to meet the rules. If we can't meet those rules, those units won't be running, past those deadlines. So it's very important to get started right now if we're going to actually go forward with that. If we're going to retire 33, we cannot do it sooner than the fall of 2021. And we can't do it later than the fall of 2023 if we're going to avoid those expenses. And again, I want to remind everybody too is that just because we picked the fall of 2023, there's other regulations that could push that forward more beyond our control. But I mean, we still haven't, that we can't really do it until the fall of 2021 because of our transmission upgrades that are required. And then lastly, just a reminder that if we're going to, we must certify the closure of 31, 32, and 33 by May of 2020 to obtain an extension of our ash pond closure date to 2028. And the reason for that that's somewhat valuable to us is that we do have line ponds that serve our water plant that are inside our ash ponds that would have to be relocated, and it's going to take time to find the right location for that and then begin the process to close our ash ponds. So one of the things here is that all of our documents are online at cop.com/IRP, including tonight's presentations, T's comments, public comments, past presentations. So all the information is there. So I'd like to really thank everybody for being patient and listening through all this information. It's definitely a lot to take in. And I am open for questions before I actually get Scott Madden up here.
Anybody have questions? Ralph? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug, and thanks for having us in this afternoon to take us through this. Needless to say, it was it's a very complicated decision. I think that my biggest concern is, and I said it this afternoon, is we've got to go out for RFP for power purchasing agreements or whatever, and we need to get the lowest price, for our ratepayers. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what kind of power it is. It's got to be the only thing I care about is the lowest price, and it's reliable. And I think that's important. I think that you can see that some of the numbers are quite staggering here. I think we all knew 31 and 32 were going to be gone, but the numbers on 33 are going to take a little bit to digest. But and then it's my understanding that technically you guys, Mayor, this is your decision. Whether we agree with it or not, it's between you and the CWLP, correct? Not throwing you under the bus, but in the grand scheme of things, that's where we're at on this, correct?
Yeah, there's a number of ways we can do it. Is carte blanche do it, or what we plan on doing is 31 and 32, has been pointed out, would be retired in fall of 2020. There's time on 33. We would probably have a utilities meeting to discuss in detail the ramifications with 33. And I think that's the challenge for everybody, because with regards to the history of the utility, what was brought into place was to provide reliable and affordable electricity to everybody. So one of the components of before 33 can be taken offline is building out the infrastructure to make sure that we can import enough power if need be for peak time. So that will take some time, but with regards to the decision, that's still debatable. The other option is bringing a resolution to the council, but that hasn't been determined one way or the other. I don't know, Corporation Counsel, do you have anything to add on that?
Oh, sorry. Did you have something to follow up with? Alderman Donlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo Alderman Hanauer's comments about, I appreciate the utility and the mayor calling us in and giving us an opportunity to kind of get a head start on this and ask questions, and because they are serious decisions that need to be made. Director, could you walk me through kind of the scenario? Obviously, we have Unit 33 that is down now because of what happened out there recently. Mm-hmm. And I understand we have insurance that's most likely going to cover what needs to be done to get it back up and running. Walk me through how that plays into all of this as far as timing and the advantages of, or disadvantages for that matter, of
Sure.
getting it rebuilt and up and running again or not.
So, we've already authorized the expenditure of $960,000, $927,000. And that's basically our $1 million deductible, essentially. So that deductibles have basically already been met. So anything going forward to repair the unit is really an insurance claim at that point. So there is no more out-of-pocket expense. That's not really a decision maker. I think going forward. And if we don't come back with 33, and 33 we would expect to come back at least by the spring, time frame. It's not going to be back next month. It's going to take longer than that to repair and get the parts ordered and everything. So, but if the unit was shut down permanently, there is no ability for us to transition employees at that point. So, I think that plays into some of the decision making, because that's definitely, I think, one of everybody's biggest concerns is, is how do we handle our employees and allowing them to try to find other jobs in the city, and benefit them. So I think that plays into that. The chances of anything changing in the market are very, very, very slim. To me, that's just not, is fracking going to be outlawed? and natural gas prices shoot up within the next year, I would highly doubt that. But
if 33 didn't get up and running as soon as you just described, my understanding is 31 and 32 would have to run longer.
Good point. Yeah, so with our transmission line upgrades, right, we still need 31, 32, or 33 until the fall of 2021. So if 33, let's just say that by chance that we did find out, they did some testing and there was major repairs, and 33 would be down until the summer or fall of next year, then it might be more prudent just to say that we're going to go ahead and shut 33 down and then keep 31, 32 longer. I mean, we don't see that really being the case right now, but it's still something that we would have to consider.
Thank you for that clarification. And then one other thing, if I can, Mr. Chairman, regarding the employees, I appreciate you've described earlier and somewhat this evening the effort to transition employees to other positions within the city and provide them opportunities for training and so forth. I think that's important. Keeps the human side of all this, but also. The interesting part is that you mentioned it earlier. Those employees that work out there are members they're in IMRF, and that my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is if the city were to offer the early out for retirement, then it'd have to be offered citywide. It can't just be offered for a subunit of.
Correct. Yes, that's the way I understand it. Yes.
So it ends up.
Bill shaking his head back there.
Yes. It ends up costing the city more money.
Yes, a lot more money.
It's not feasible.
And if there's a retirement incentive, it would be paid, I think, 31 days after the fact. So it would not affect necessarily the IMRF pension, but it would be something nice to do for our employees.
You're trying to come up with some creative
incentivize
way.
them. And a retirement incentive is designed to take somebody from, let's just say, Unit 4 that's ready to retire, and they're not willing to go yet, and they're going to wait another 3 years. Let's just say maybe an incentive would entice them to leave and retire, and then one of our people from Unit 31, 32, 33 could then apply for that job and move over there. So that's what we're looking at. And that's not just for Unit 4, but other areas that we have within the utility. We would try to look at that. But it would definitely be targeted. It's not necessarily something that I don't know if, it's up to further discussion if, what that net really is, the scope of it.
Understand. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Doug, thank you for a very detailed and comprehensive and well thought out briefing. And as Alderman Donlin mentioned, we aldermen had a chance to receive the same briefing in groups of 2 and 3 or 1 in the last 2 days. So we've had a chance to digest this important information and think about it. And the conclusion I've come to is that the certification of closure of 33, the rationale you've given for that is compelling and irrefutable in terms of the savings cost, the operational savings cost, which that generates, and also the capital expenditures which are avoided. So, Maris, we heard tonight, Doug, you've recommended a administrative decision by the end of January regarding 33 and a certification to the regulatory energy officials by the end of May in order to avoid the which gives us extension on meeting certain expensive regulatory obligations. Who do we certify closure to?
Is that with the EPA? Right, no. Yeah, it'd be for the EPA.
Okay. And as others have mentioned, we have to be careful with our 50 to 80 employees that ultimately may be impacted, but we have to always think about our 60,000 retail and business customers that we are obligated to perform at a lowest cost, at a lowest reasonable cost capacity. So when you balance 50 to 100 employees versus 60,000 retail and commercial accounts, that's what we got to, on the scale of what we need to do, the scale balances in one direction too strongly. Because I think the retention of jobs, it seems to be the only rationale that I can think of to avoid the closure commitment come May of 2020, unless I'm missing something. I don't see other reasons there to keep 33 open.
Anyone else? Alderman Conley?
Thank you, Chair. And Doug, again, I echo everyone. I appreciate all the information that you've been giving us. One thing that you brought up when we were talking about this were some of the maintenance and upgrades to our existing distribution system that have had to been put off because of significant financial outlays. And the one thing that really triggered my interest is the underground maintenance of existing underground electrical wires, and then I'll just say conversion from our overhead. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that? Because I have heard from a lot of people who would like to see their wires go from under the trees to under the ground.
Right. Well, as far as, our budget goes, even this fiscal, or the budget that you guys will vote on, next, and you'll hear, I think our budget hearing is the 23rd of January. We've had to cut underground projects. I mean, we're doing some, but we could do more. And I think we need to ramp those efforts up. We could do more LED lighting conversion. But, we're struggling because the power plants, cost so much to operate. So it does affect our budget when revenues keep dropping. And that's really, the revenues are outside of our control. I think, when I was coming up with my slide, I was thinking, because of our high cost and low market, it's not really a high cost as much as the market has changed significantly from what it was, 10 years ago. So it's really changed the direction that we have to take with our utility to protect our ratepayers moving forward. So moving that in that direction, if we have more funding available, then, it would take a lot more funding, though, to take existing lines that are overhead and put them underground. We've done that as new things are developed, new subdivisions. That's easy to do. Newer communities like Naperville, they have a lot underground because it was basically built a lot later than what the city of Springfield was. So it would definitely take significant resources to do that. So it's a balance for the city council to determine in the future, once the units are retired and we have more savings, how much rate relief do we give to our businesses versus spending on infrastructure improvements that we want to ramp things up to. So there's going to be a balancing act, I think, for all of you in the future to determine.
Anyone else? Alderman Hanauer.
Not to mention, we still got the albatross out there called the ash pond.
That's correct, and we do have other infrastructure projects too, for like the relocation of our dispatch center and our basically our computer servers for the city, and that facility is probably going to cost about $20 million. So and we want to make sure we keep our cash levels at a respectable level, not draining our resources to do some of those projects that we have ahead of us.
And that's probably an issue that we probably need to take up at a further committee meeting in the future, because we just need to focus on the IRP tonight if we could, right. And that way, that is an issue that's affecting all of us, Alderman. So I agree with you. We need to look at that if we can obviously afford it. So, does anybody else have anything on the IRP?
Just one other thing, and Doug, if you could, you described to us earlier, because we are all asked this question periodically, occasionally about why we can't convert those older units into natural gas. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about those costs and what would be involved with that.
So they did a look at that. I think it was in 2012. And the cost that we received back basically said, if I remember, it was about $30 million just to convert the gas line to a bigger size, because that's what would be needed. That's not including the costs for the unit itself to convert it, because the boiler tubes have to be redone. Not necessarily every single one, but there's a lot of it that has to be redone. The burners have to be redone. So there's millions of dollars of cost just for the unit themselves to be converted. So again, investing that much money into units like that, and then let's just say that the Clean Energy Jobs Act comes into play. That's going to take out fossil fuels. So, we'll be spending money that we can't get back.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Doug, I was just concerned about, have we thought about refitting 33 and go from the wet to the dry ash conversion?
Yeah, 33 for the fly ash, I believe, was about $14 or $15 million. And then the bottom ash, I'm trying to remember, how much was that? $7 million. But then we also have the issue of the scrubber blowdown treatment facility that we would need. And running 33 and 4, it's probably not going to be 45 million, but it's going to be up there because most of the flow is coming from those units. We're talking very, very large dollars of capital expenditures, and especially for 33, when it is losing money compared to the market. Okay, I want to make sure that distinction is made because the market can fluctuate with pricing and stuff. But yeah, those are considerations that I think that they're kind of laid out there for the most part.
And obviously, the hedging strategy that you put forth is based on the gas prices as they are now and what you project. But if you think about what could happen next November, if fracking goes away, those prices are going to change considerably, right?
Yeah, let's just say that if we I guess chose to retire 33 and gas prices changes like that, we can try to do an analysis then at that point to see if it's worth trying to keep it and invest in that unit to meet compliance instead of shutting it down. But again, it's highly unlikely that would actually occur right now. The gas industry, I think, is pretty solid in how things are moving along. And plus the production levels from these gas facilities keep dropping. So more rigs keep falling off and stop operating, but production levels keep increasing. So they're getting more efficient at what they're doing.
Before we go to the next speaker, I wanted to thank the mayor for bringing us all together for the meeting that we had today at his office explaining this. It was very informative, and that was well done, so I appreciate that. If you don't have anything else, we'll move to the Scott Madden Incorporated.
Yeah, so we brought Scott Madden on because even though we haven't really firmed up exactly what we're doing here, we really wanted to show you that we are thinking about the decommissioning plan and what that would entail. So, they were brought in so we could really kickstart off the discussions amongst all our functional areas, not just with the utility, but with other city departments, and help facilitate that discussion. So it's been very fruitful for that, and I'll turn it over to Todd Williams from Scott Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, Mayor, Alderwomen, Aldermen. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, Mr. Brown laid out the compelling case for why to bring these units down. What we were asked to do was to really answer the question of how to do it. What would be the plan to decommission these units? And so that's what I intend to speak about tonight. High level, I'd like to give you a quick overview on the plan, talk about the objectives of the project that we were brought in to do, our approach, some planning guidelines that we used to collaborate with CWLP as well as the City of Springfield, roles and accountabilities throughout the process, and give you a summary of the plan as well as next steps. So from an overview perspective, Mr. Brown covered most of this on this page. So I won't rehash it here, except to say at the bottom of the page, really, that the plan was built by the CWLP identified specific functional area leads within both the CWLP as well as the City of Springfield. We worked together, we being Scott Madden, worked together with those leads to identify a very specific list of deliverables, function by function, that needed to happen to support decommissioning. So our basis of comparison is that Scott Madden has helped other utilities decommission their plants, both fossil and nuclear. And so we bring experience with decommissioning process, and we've seen multiple other plans and what good looks like, essentially. And so together we were able to craft this plan. And then the final note here is that with the recent forced outage event at Dahlman 3, when this plan was being completed, we were uncertain of the really the impact that would have on the overall decommissioning plan. And I think, Alderman Donlin, you were getting to some of that in terms of, if-then scenarios. And so what we did was really we decided to step back and make it a relative plan, and I'll speak to that in more detail in a minute. So a little bit more overview, but really we want to I'll skip some of this, but our understanding from a governance perspective is that decommissioning plan would be reviewed, revised and approved by CWLP, which it has been, and then reviewed with input by the aldermen, alderwomen yesterday and today, and then final decommissioning approval by the mayor. So that might change, but that was our understanding from a governance perspective. The overall project objectives were to create a formal, sustainable decommissioning plan that would execute the retirements of units 31, 32, and 33 at Dahlman, to identify supporting specific tasks, activities, actions necessary to carry out that plan, and to provide mechanisms for functional areas to cross-coordinate their activities with each other in terms of timing, messaging, approvals, implementation, things like that. And then align across impacted functional areas at CWLP. You really want all the functional areas. You want everybody singing from the same song sheet. You want everybody using the same dates, the same set of assumptions. From a CWLP perspective, there's different ways to decommission units. You can go to brownfield, you can go to greenfield, but what CWLP has decided is that the decommissioning process, or the final state of decommissioning, entails making the units and the facility safe and compliant, and then abandoning it in place. So that is a very, it's probably one of the more popular approaches to decommissioning across many utilities, and its short form is called abandon in place. And so that is the final state for this particular plan. In the future, demolition, deconstruction would have to be addressed separately. So the plan approach is a three-phased approach. We are currently finished with phase one, which is the high-level plan. It's the identification of the specific activities that needed to be completed to decommission the unit, with discussion and consent across the different functional areas. And then that's what we would be looking for approval on, is from a plan perspective, once the dates are finalized. Phase two is essentially a detailed plan where you refine it based on the approval process and input from the approval process. You prepare a more granular level of detail, so each one of the activities in the high-level plan would necessitate a specific series of actions and activities to support them, so those would have to be fleshed out. And then you would integrate the activities between functional areas, again, to make sure that all the timing, all the elements are concurrent. And then phase three is really the execution of the plan. From a guidelines perspective, we understand that when you take a baseload power plant that it's been in a community for decades, long term, that there's a lot of it's almost an institution in some ways, and so there's sufficient necessity to bring a level of gravitas to the planning of the decommissioning. It's not something you do willy-nilly. It's not something you do lightly. But so we wanted to make sure that there was sufficient gravitas in the planning process, and so we established together with CWLP these planning guidelines. But we wanted to maintain planning confidentiality throughout the process and communicate professionally with one voice. We wanted to make sure that the project is organized as a cohesive project and integrated across various functions. We wanted to make sure that employees were informed of the timelines and their options once it's time to inform the employees, and that they'll be engaged with CWLP's core values. whenever you do decommissioning, you need to make sure that all operational, regulatory, legal, financial, all the regulatory compliance activities need to be accounted for and be met in time and on full. And then finally, the planning focus would be on decommissioning the units, assuming governance approval, but also considering the collateral impacts, which would be the grid, CWLP, the city of Springfield, and the customers of the utility. From a organization standpoint, this is just a high-level view of the project team. So the core team was made up of Mr. Brown, Mr. Davis, and Mr. Rogers from CWLP. They were in all the meetings together with us. Scott Madden, myself and my colleague provided advice, input. We also pulled the plan together based on the inputs from the functional areas. And then there's 15 functional areas that participated. I won't read all of them to you. The short form is on the board, but really it's from ops, maintenance, engineering, all the way over to finance, accounting, and supply chain are some of the 15 areas. So from a plan summary, the specific plan is Excel-based. It has very specific list of deliverables, and in fact 95 deliverables across those 15 functional areas. Each functional area identified from 1 to 12 specific activities or things that have to happen to support decommissioning. Each one of those 95 deliverables has a description, an owner, sometimes a secondary owner. Where necessary, it either identifies Unit 31 and 32 or Unit 33, so the plan can be extrapolated if a different decision is made between those two options. And then it also has a start date and a finish date. And so that's the way the plan is built. It hinges against 7 key milestone dates, and I'll go through those in a minute. But essentially, because of what happened in 33, we decided to make it what we call a relative plan. And the plan is waiting for the identification of 7 dates, of 7 key milestones that have to be plugged in. And once those dates are understood, once they're in the plan auto-populates, because activities either have to precede those events or immediately follow or have some timing differentials against those particular 7 dates. So we built it as what we call a relative plan. And phase 1, just as a reminder, is really just a high-level plan, which will require in phase 2 more details. So the 7 dates that are specific to decommissioning, the first date, apologies, I recognize this is a bit small for especially people in the audience, but the first one is the decision date, the date that the governance decision is made to close the units and to commence with decommissioning. That's essentially giving the green light to decommissioning. So that date needs to be loaded into the plan. The employee announcements are another key date. That would happen. You'd want that to happen fairly soon after that decision date, almost immediately afterwards. But you would notify employees in person of the decision, the timeline that's impacting them, their position, their options, and their resources available to them. The third date is the MISO notification. MISO requires a heads-up notice, official notification of intention to close plants through a formal process. It's just really notification. But there's timing involved in that. The enabling construction, Mr. Brown mentioned some of this in his presentation, but essentially the grid needs certain upgrades to be able to import more power. The physical plant itself needs some construction done to support heating, but there's some physical construction that needs to be in place before you would take the final unit out of place, because it's required to operate a safe and reliable grid. The next 2 dates are the dates for the 31-32 shutdown, and then the 6th date is the date for the 33 shutdown. And then the final date on the far right is the decommissioning finish, the time where all the decommissioning activities are completed, and then essentially you're on a decommissioning schedule. My final slide is the next steps or near-term planning. So what's immediately proceeding? The plan review was today with aldermen, the mayor. By the end of December, the expectation is that GE will have their extent of condition report available to CWLP for consideration on the next steps of what happens with that unit. By January, really looking to finalize the dates because of some of the environmental commitments that Mr. Brown mentioned, but January is a great date to target for loading those final dates. There was some pushback on, does it have to be January? And I think the answer is it's highly preferable to lock this in by January. Otherwise, you're doing some conditional-based activities within CWLP. And then the next would be employee discussions once those dates are finalized. So those would go on. Those don't just happen at one point in time. You need somewhat of an iterative process because of work rules like bumping and things like that. So there's several iterations of employee discussions that need to happen. And then once those employee notifications happen is when you typically launch employee support. And so what we've seen other clients do is that their support for whether it's finding another job, reskilling, giving advice on pension and financial considerations, but anybody impacted by this decision would have a resource center to go to, the information that they need to make their best decision, et cetera. And so that's what we call employee support. And that's the end. Any questions?
Any aldermen? Any questions? I have one. Mayor, is Scott Matten been brought under contract to do the decommissioning, or is that coming?
That would have to be forthcoming in an ordinance, that phase 2 that you alluded to. So I don't know if you want to cover that piece.
Phase 2 we're available to do. It's essentially just detailed planning in terms of each one of those 95 deliverables needs to have a fully fleshed out plan.
I wanted to thank you for meeting with us individually, and then we met before that too. You were very thorough in your proposal, and look forward to making a smooth transition, hopefully.
Thank you.
Any other aldermen have any comments? If not, we'll move on. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Is there any unfinished business come before the committee? Any new business? Do we have speakers, Mr. Clerk?
We do. Phil Gannett.
Please state your name for the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Phil Garnett. I live at 1616 Cressa Court. I represent the Illinois Coal Association, and I'm also here as a citizen of Springfield. A lot of information just dumped on all of us, I guess, today. A lot that I had planned to say. Some of it's relevant, some of it isn't. So we're going to need some time to absorb this. But I guess what brings to light here is what is the process. When we embarked on the IRP process, I thought that would be the piece that would set the policy of everything going forward. But we haven't had anything for over 6 months. And now we've seen a piecemeal approach that we've got a plan to shut down the power plants and take care of that. You've passed union contracts that have severance pay. So I think you kind of got the cart before the horse, but it's too late now. I mean, we started down the process, and for the past 6 months, maybe some of these questions could have been answered. But just jotting down some notes here, because most of my prepared statement is not very relevant, not all that relevant. But one of the points that wasn't raised and it affects power prices is the capacity that's out there. And it's no secret that Vistra has announced shutting down 3,000 megawatts of power plant in MISO. That's less energy out there. When you have less energy, will prices go up? And so I'm still concerned about prices going forward. And I'm not sure we've seen the effect of that because those plants haven't closed. They're going to be in the process of closing. The jet technology, Doug touched on that. I really haven't had a lot of contact with JET, and frankly, they've turned their attention to other projects around the world, and they're really not strongly pursuing scrubbers in the United States. That's still not saying that they won't do it, and I think they're interested. My conversations recently with JET don't square 100% with what Doug has said, and I'm not going to say someone's wrong here, but I still would like to see that technology out there, because in the IRP, that range was 20 years, and that could save the utility $300 million. Well, $300 million is a lot of money. You can do something to the ash ponds. You can do the dry ash handling system, and some of the things that Doug has outlined here that cost money. If you can save $300 million over that time, I think you need to take a serious look at it. And I really don't think there's been a serious look taken at it. And then, Doug, when you mention energy going forward, I know a big piece of this is renewables. And the IRP, in fact, called for replacing Darwin 1, 2, and 3 with almost 50% from renewable energy. And the comment that I made at the time is, I think that's a blackout plan for the city of Springfield. The wind and solar are intermittent, unreliable energy sources that cannot supply the power we need when we need it. And renewable energy is only available about a third of the time. We've seen evidence of reliance on renewable energy just this year in Texas. There, wind generating capacity makes up about 25% of their total capacity in Texas. But on the hottest days of the year, this year, most of the windmills were not available. The price of power increases, the total price, when wind drops off. And on several days this year in Texas, wholesale electricity prices hit $9,000 per megawatt. 9,000. This is something that averages $40. 9,000. And here's some information from a story published in August by Bloomberg News entitled "Texas Energy Prices Spike as Demand Strains Grid." Wholesale, and I quote, "Wholesale electricity prices have shot up as much as 21,147% to $3,800 a megawatt hour across the Texas grid. On Monday, they jumped to 36,000% to average as much as $6,500 per megawatt hour. It's a record that has turned the Lone Star State into the most expensive place to buy power in all of America's major markets." It's happening in Texas. Reliance on renewables. So I guess the decisions are going to have to be made soon. We've already in January, as soon as that. But there's a lot of uncertainty out there, a lot of things that need to be looked at, which I would hope that this council will take a serious look at. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Phil, as you heard me say earlier, that's my point on going out for RFP for the lowest price of energy for the ratepayers. I don't care if it's renewable. If renewables come in and they're part of the portfolio, great. But if they come in high, then we leave them out. I don't, I want what's, and I think most people here want what's reliable and affordable and the least costly energy that we can get our ratepayers. Otherwise, keep the plants going and we'll just keep status quo. I mean, the idea of us closing these plants is to help our ratepayers. And if we're gonna, I agree with you on the Texas issue, but I also, if there's room in our portfolio, if they come in at a decent number, I don't see a problem. But we have to have other power to take the place of in case they can't go. As well as with the RFP, I do think that there needs to be, I guess it's performance bonds or whatever, to where if a company can't provide us the power, if the windmills aren't turning or whatever, they can't provide us power, they're going to have to pay a substantial amount, because we'll have to go out on the market and get it from the spot market, which that
Those are the prices,
that could be
high
ugly.
prices,
So I fully am aware of what you're saying, and I do believe that we need to do this RFP for the lowest price energy we can find.
Yeah, and I'd say it's a great point, Alderman, and I don't know the market for electricity the way I used to. I'm not sure purchase power agreements, how firm they can be in terms of price, because when you have a variable wholesale market out there, I don't know that how that would work, but prices do go up, and we experienced it here at CWLP when I was here in 1999. I mean, we sold 50 megawatts of power to Silco for 16 hours one day for $1,800 per megawatt, something that cost us $30 to make. We made a ton of money that week, and that's 20 years ago. But is that going to come back? We're seeing baseload plant after baseload plant, mostly coal, shutting down, and natural gas is an alternative, but natural gas has its drawbacks too. Infrastructure. You heard, part of it even to convert to Almond would need infrastructure to do it. Well, the main infrastructure drawback for natural gas is a pipeline. Do you want one in your backyard? So how do you get it from the trunk line to the power plant is a major problem, and they're being opposed all across the country. So, natural gas is one of the answers, but it can't be the only answer.
Alderman Minimum.
Mr. Gannett, you once managed our utility, so you come with a range of experience, but now you represent the coal association, and so we have to take that into consideration in reviewing your comments. I suppose we could find a scarce story anywhere. It could be from Texas, it could be in South America, it could be in India, but we have to look at MISO. That's the grid that we're part of here in Springfield. That's the relevant grid that we have to look at. And what I heard our current utility manager telling us is that we can lock in natural gas prices over a 10-year contract and have a series of contracts that guarantees us a price of electricity that falls below what it costs us to run units 31, 32, and 33. That's what I heard tonight. And if we can lock in those prices, then we don't have to worry about, some unique situation in Texas with the spot market, because hopefully we'll be avoiding the spot market with the long-term purchase power agreements that we will enter into. So I think it's a legitimate concern if we were going to be subject to the spot markets, but what I heard tonight was that we will avoid that predicament.
Yeah,
so.
And that could be. I'm not certain about that answer, Alderman, but I think, I'm not sure.
Alderman DeCenso.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm a little concerned because, you act like a bomb was dropped on you tonight, but we did have this information, and it's been discussed quite openly and frequently about closing down 31, 32, and 33. So this isn't new information. It just might be accelerated to you, but it's
I think some of the details we learned tonight, there's a lot of new details tonight.
Well, I don't feel like it's accelerated to us.
Okay.
I mean, something we deal with every day.
Sure.
And, just to be clear, no one's excited about this. These are tough decisions to make.
Oh, I know.
And this is it is a Springfield institution, and we're doing what's right for the city. We have to do what's right for the city. Environmentally, as far as the rates go, it's not fun sitting up here and having these conversations.
I didn't say it was.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of information that came down tonight. Tough decisions out there. I'm not saying that's not the case.
Thank you, Mr. Gannett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown, will you want to come?
Yeah, I want to clarify just a couple things. As far as the VSER closing their plants, the IRP did consider that in their modeling through MISO. The MISO was aware of that, so that is in part of their look at that. Also, just to kind of clarify, because I don't want to make sure that myself or my staff, are challenged at all when it comes to dealing with JED. The last email I have is from October 9th. It was from the Senior Vice President, Richard Westerdale, basically saying that he would come back to me and provide me with information regarding the meeting our regulatory requirements for emissions, and I have received nothing to date. Okay, so I just want to make sure that's clear that we've been reaching out with them multiple meetings all summer long, and when they ask us for information, sometimes it takes us a while to to gather all that information and give it to them. But there's been back and forth, and that's where we're at today. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Bob Padlasek.
Please state your name for the committee.
Oh, sure. Hey, good evening. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Podlasek. I live at 2512 Churchill Road, Springfield. Lived there for 45 years. And I'm in Jim's district. I know some of you folks.
You live right by the ramp.
I live by the, what's the mayor call it? What did you call that ramp that jumps over Churchill Road?
Churchill Bridge.
No. What's those guys with the cars?
That doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter. The mayor called it. Hey, but I've been around for 45 years, but there's about 5 takeaways that I want to give to you tonight in talking about this subject. First of all, I love Springfield. I live here. I don't work here, but I love Springfield, and I'm really concerned about Springfield, always interested. I rarely come here and speak before the city council, but I had come before about 12 years ago when there was a case where we were trying to build a power plant. I think it's number 4, and they were going to do a wind contract and that sort of thing. So I was there. I want to leave another thing in your mind about utility groupthink, because that happens so often. And I'll come through it, but I've had so many experiences with utility groupthink. And the other thing I want to mention is the geopolitical uncertainties associated with energy. I've worked for large energy companies around the world, and I've had to deal with those kinds of things. The fourth thing I want to mention is the human side of what you're doing. You're laying people off, you're taking their jobs away, you're forcing them into retirement, that sort of thing. And the next thing, the final thing, which is kind of esoteric but still important, is that Justice Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court, he said he's going to be the 5th vote on the no delegation doctrine. That was presented as an editorial in the Wall Street Journal about the 22nd of November, but Vox, V-O-X, that website has that on the 26th of November. What that entails is that there is 5 justices on the Supreme Court waiting for a case that says that the agencies in Washington, like the EPA, cannot delegate all the rules, that the rules have to be delegated by Congress. That is coming down the pike, potentially. Huge impact on what we're talking about today. But now I want to just shift to my prepared comments. I live in Churchill Road. I went to the U of I, got 5 degrees. Ended up teaching at Bradley University for 35 years, assistant dean of engineering for 26 years, worked at Battelle in Columbus, Ohio in the energy business, worked for the chairman of the Illinois Commerce Commission as his administrative assistant for energy, dealt with all bunch of energy policy, worked for a large number of companies doing energy projects for a year. I was chairman of the audit committee of the Mid-America Solar Energy Corporation. I've done a whole range of things associated with energy, and I've looked at every aspect of energy through my professional career, but I really don't share it very much around. But the last time I was here was about 12 years ago or so, when the city of Springfield was deciding on building a new power plant and trying to decide on whether to purchase the wind contract. During that time, there was expert after expert, and it was in the newspaper, and I testified too. The experts say if we purchase this wind, what's it, about 100 megawatts of wind, we're going to break even. Maybe we'll make $80,000. How much did we win? How much did we make on that thing? We're down, what, 100 million, 120 million?
140.
$140 million. That tells you what the uncertainty is in making these energy projections by the folks who are in the groupthink of the energy thing. So you're getting caught up in all of this. You're getting all the different statements. I'm giving you 45 years of experience. What's happening in Germany? What's happening in the utility rates? It's going sky high. They're 3 or 4 times higher. They went to renewables. They're in trouble. They're driving people around out in industry. You've got to really be careful. Natural gas pricing, you're darn right. Some utilities in Texas are being paid to take natural gas at night to generate electricity because of fracking and infrastructure lack and that sort of thing. This stuff jumps all over the place. When I said things weren't as certain as the experts said, all these big experts that the utility hired, I was shouted down a little bit, but I was more than accurate, more than correct. And so I just want to make that. I follow MISO all the time. We bring MISO representatives to our classes at Bradley, so I know about that. The uncertainties are just all over the place. I know Exxon has said they're going to be able to produce oil for less than $10 a barrel with fracking and directional drilling and all that sort of stuff. I've been on the North Slope. I've been out to Alaska. I've been to all of these things, so I know what's happening.
Please conclude your remarks.
Sure. But the bottom line is you're being buffaloed into moving too quickly. Wait a year or two, see what all of this sorts out. You're trying to deal with the future of Springfield, and this future of Springfield is the power plant is part of it. And right now, we're in a huge area of uncertainty. Making projections like they can. Everybody can make projections, just like I can make stock market projections or anything else. How reliable is this stuff? It wasn't reliable when I was here. When 20 years ago, it was horribly unreliable, and now you're going to try to make decisions on that. The simplest thing you can do is just hold off for a while, cool your heels, see what happens. There was a lot of good points made here tonight, and you're being pushed into it.
Please conclude your remarks.
Sure. And I think there's plenty of other things. I don't have a crystal ball, but there's a lot of uncertainty here, and you're dealing with human things in the future of Springfield. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions either here or at some later date. So thank you very much. I've lived here for 45 years, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, we got just a few comments. Not questions, but comments. Number one, we've already delayed our decision by 1 year, so we're thinking about this very carefully. When the TEA came to us a year ago, they said we should be shutting down units 31 and 32 right now. So we've already delayed 1 year to do this carefully. So, and some of us have been delaying this for 5 or 6 years because we were kind of on board to doing this some time ago. Regarding the wind contracts always get beat up because we locked in some prices 10 or 12 years ago, and then meanwhile the price of electricity dropped. But let's think about this more deeply. The facts are, in retrospect, if we want a quarterback, we could say, well, we should have never built unit number 4, because that cost $500 million in construction costs and $500 million in financing. So that was a $1 billion mistake. As it turns out, we could have purchased power from the grid at a much lesser cost than building unit number 4. So, if we want a quarterback, we can quarterback that decision too. There's one other point that, and Mr. Podolak, I respect you because you're an engineer and so forth, but I think we're thinking this through very carefully, and I respect the presentations that were received tonight, and I've missed the other point I was going to make, but those are the main key ones. We've delayed a year already, and I don't know what that no delegation authority is, but I'll check it out that Mr. Thomas was talking about. Usually it's no delegation from the legislative body to the regulatory body, and I'll check what that's about. No delegation from the EPA to some lower body. I'm not familiar with that problem. Okay.
Thank you.
Will do.
And Mr. Clerk?
Yes.
Is there anyone else?
No one else has signed up.
Is there anyone from the audience that wants to speak? Yes, sir. You came up and asked if you could speak. Please state your name for the committee.
Good evening. My name is Rick Penio. I was an employee of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency for over 30 years. I worked in the Division of Water Pollution Control in both the industrial and municipal unit. The reason why I have so much interest in this is that I don't think that an option that should have been considered was, and that option is to use food waste and convert the food waste to electricity by anaerobic digestion. Using anaerobic digestion, you can generate methane. The methane can be burned and converted to electricity in much the same fashion as you would with natural gas. This option would remove food waste from the landfills, which there's about 730 football stadiums worth of food waste generated in the United States each year, 30 million tons, a large amount. And the volume is in itself, if you clear that volume out of there, you're going to save a lot of landfill life. Then the second thing is that you don't need scrubbers because you're not going to be burning anything that would require it. And then you can treat the wastewater and utilize algae in that wastewater treatment system and put the CO2 exhaust from the combustion of the methane into that treatment system. The algae will convert it back to oxygen. So you can reduce or even eliminate CO2 emissions. And then the last thing that it would do is create a fertilizer, specifically not only ammonia, but phosphorus. And phosphorus is a mineral that's being depleted. And we need a solution to that, and this could be a very good solution. And I think Springfield should consider it. Yeah, it hasn't been done much. There are a few places that have operating plants, but US EPA and state would provide some grant and other sources of funding. I've got a paper right here that talks about it. So in closing, I'd like to say that that's something that you all should consider as well. And it would provide baseline power and not intermittent power, and would be considered a renewable source of energy.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Dennison? Please state your name for the committee. Yes.
Roger Dennison, 2528 Muirfield Road. I'm here representing Foresight Energy. Real quick, I want to thank Doug for presentation. There were some things in there that, as Alderman Ascenso said, that maybe you folks have been dealing with a long time. It helped me to understand some other things, so I had to tear up my notes and start from scratch here. So I don't know if that's good or bad. But anyway, one statement is in there I hope we can answer as we go forward, not tonight. When Doug says we can't find a coal price to keep Dahlman 3 running, my question would be the Foresight price that I presented here. Does that help Dahlman 3 run? That's been my case all along, looking for an RFP. So hopefully we can look at that and see. I feel that TEA, T looked at speculative what the market is, but the real true market is central Illinois. What can you get coal for? We bid the real market in 2016. We bid in the real market right now. So we hope that that's what will be looked at for the IRP with this case. Also, last time, if we have a chance to sit down and negotiate something here from our company, our 2016 bid, we said we're willing to sit down and negotiate and help with funds for environmental compliance or whatever for the units that work for both parties. And that's why we were willing to bid a longer term if it's there. So that's something we could still sit down and discuss going forward. I felt, I'd have to relook some of them again since I re-scribbled these notes tonight, but I thought when I looked at like our coal prices, it actually dropped the MPV-RR for Dahlman 3 over 60%, and the cost per megawatt hour was down 13-14%. I'd have to look again, but it's that kind of range, and my question would be, does that help keep Dahlman 3 in the market? They said it's over $29 million in cost over the next 5 years. The price I presented yesterday saves $33.5 million over the next 5 years. So, you know, the costs that are in here, these two should be looked here. My question is, like, our bid's sitting here saying you could save $33.5 million. One or two things is going to happen. If we were, you're either going to give that money to Archco or you're going to keep it for the city with my bid. So all that said, I appreciate the opportunity, even though there was no RFPs in that, but I appreciate you folks allowing us to come in and discuss and present a price there. That was our whole point, to try to save these units. Again, our price is 28% less than Arch's price. It's in there. I saw the SJR printed in the paper today. They didn't have apples and apples. They had Arch's mine price and our delivered price, but that's what we'll work on together here as we go forward. My thing was, too, I was a little surprised that the folks that have the current business, when we've all heard for well over a year these plants are going away, and the response is to raise the price 6% over 5 years. Our response has been to come in and say, what will it take to keep these plants going long term? So anyway, that's where it was at. We bid that in 2016 and 2021. There's no gun to our head as you folks have a coal price. I do understand, Alderman McMinimum, what you're saying, too. There's times some things should have been happening. We're there at this point. So we'll be providing the answers to the questions Corporation Council had last night. I was tied into an email this morning that included some questions from Mr. Davis. We'll get that. And we also want to answer the questions you folks had around the horseshoe as we go forward and validate our position. So anyway, anything we need to do, we're here to do it. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight on the IRP, and appreciate you folks putting up with me all this time. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Andy Knott with the Sierra Club, and I'm just going to briefly review some of the previous analyses that were not talked about this evening that I think are worth noting. Starting back in 2013, CWLP hired Burns & McDonnell to do an analysis of Dahlman, and one of the findings of that report was that units 31 and 32 were economically marginal, is how it was worded. Move ahead to 2017. Some of you may remember the Sierra Club commissioned a report by Synapse Energy and Economics. That report found that between 2008 and 2016, that all the units at Dahlman were $261 million more than the market energy prices. Just one side note, if you look at just unit 33 from that analysis, it came out to about $9.5 million a year more than market energy prices, so it's fairly similar to what T found earlier this year, about $10 million a year. That's just one point on unit 33. The other thing that happened in 2017 was that the Chamber of Commerce hired the Power Bureau. They presented that report, I think it was in May of 2018 in this room. It was one of the comments on the IRP when the IRP was getting started. And that report, it was different than the report we did. It included debt service on Unit 4, but the numbers came out about twice the cost that we had come up with, that the Synapse had come up with. So if we had left out those cost of those debt service costs, or if we had added those to ours, it would probably be about the same. So, but the numbers are all roughly the same there. I won't review the Energy Authority's analysis. You all have seen it, heard about it again today. And then also today, we heard Mr. Brown's sort of check on T's work, and it sounds like the numbers are actually a little bit higher based on CWLP's internal analysis. So my point is that you've had a lot of experts presenting analyses. They've all been fairly similar. and come to really kind of bring you to the same conclusion. And we think the path is clear, and we would just urge the city to move ahead with implementing the IRP and establishing a transition plan for the workers at Dahlman, so that the ratepayers can save millions of dollars a year. Last thing I just want to say is that with regard to the phrase blackout plan that we heard earlier today, that's just not how the grid works. I mean, no one is proposing that you all remove Springfield from the grid. You will still be part of the Midwest and the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO. So you will still have electricity no matter what happens locally. And the other thing on the reliability issue is that this was on a slide that Scott Madden had earlier. One of the steps is for the utility to notify MISO of a unit retirement, and then MISO has to basically approve that. And MISO is not going to allow any utility to retire a unit if it's going to result in a reliability issue for the grid. So that's a guarantee. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to close the public comments part. Director, did you want to follow up with the final? Hold on, one more. Last one. Please state your name for the committee.
My name is William T. Schaefer. I live at 2320 Peppermill Point Court, the mayor's neighborhood. I had a question. How this trouble at CWLP, how's it going to affect their payment in lieu of taxes, the pilot payment they make to the city of Springfield? And then did they take into consideration the new natural gas plant they're going to build in Pawnee?
Is that your comment?
That's the two of them, yep.
Mr. Director.
Is there anybody else?
General Manager, Director, Supervisor, whatever.
I can answer those two questions pretty much. That's a question we get frequently about the pilot. In reality, is our wholesale sales have been dropping. Our retail sales have been pretty more or less. I mean, it's pretty much been flat. So the effects on the pilot, basically it's 3.75% of revenues. So it's really probably more just the nature of about $500,000 probably worth of impact to the corporate side once those units are retired, because that really affects more 3132, because that's really the primary function of those units is for wholesale sales. As far as the gas plant in Pawnee, if they decide to build and we do an RFP, they would be allowed to bid on that. Whatever blocks of power that we would actually need. We don't need, though, a full-sized plant, which is, I think one of the sizes was like 550 megawatts. So we would only buy a small portion, basically, of power from that plant if they were able to meet, the economics versus other bidders. Just my statement, just to make sure, is that when I stated about the coal price, looking at what would make 31, 32, and 33 economic, there is no coal price that we saw that could make a mine operate. So even their Foresight's, unsolicited offer doesn't work to keep those units economic. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear for everybody, because I thought I stated it pretty clear, just in general terms, but I wanted to be more specific with that.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That was a good question regarding the payment in lieu of taxes. So, Doug, our payment in lieu of taxes, that's the payment from our utility to our corporate fund for city operations. That current payment in lieu of taxes is based on a formula that looks at retail revenue.
All revenue.
All revenue.
Yeah.
So it's
retail and wholesale sales.
We used to have two formulas, one for wholesale, one for retail, but now it's just a one formula for everything.
Correct. In 2015, we did the rate restructuring. Prior to that, I don't remember the exact percentage. It was like 2 point something plus like 30% of wholesale sales. And then we did the rate restructuring. I think it was kind of seen that, the future could change with our wholesale sales, plus the market was declining. It was felt that, I think, by everybody that we should change that to just a straight percentage of all sales.
And that's a percentage of sales, not a percentage of generation, but a percentage of sales.
Correct.
So
yes.
shutting or decommissioning plants does not impact the formula, is the way I understand it, because we're still going to have the same relative amount of sales to our retail and commercial customers.
Right. It's right now with the sales that we typically have. It's again, it's about probably a $500,000 hit. I mean,
we lose some sales. Wholesale sales
will
but they're
disappear.
a declining percentage of our total sales.
Right.
All right.
Thank you, General Manager. Any closing comments by the Alderman?
It's complicated.
If not, we got a lot of decisions to make. The mayor's got a lot of decisions to make, and hopefully we'll work through these issues. A lot of information came forward. I know that the utility's working diligently with the administration and with Scott Madden. We appreciate you guys coming. With that, we have no other executive session. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Good night.
I didn't mean to. Maybe we should consult ahead of time.
Professor now, I was professor at